Just a little bit. The last couple of years, it's been a good reprieve having some moisture hit the ground, kind of replenish the aquifers, obviously revitalize the soil, if you will. So yeah, I'm not mad at it. I like to say maybe this isn't great for ownership, but I like drought years. Lower yields, more concentration in the wines. Obviously, make a little bit of less wine, but I think overall, from a quality standpoint, it's okay. But obviously we can't go years and years without having the aquifers and just water replenished within the system. So once in a while, I'll give way and allow a little bit of rain and be happy about it. I am, yes.
Okay. I don't know if you guys get offended by that term or what.
I grew up in Yountville, so I guess technically I'm a Yountvillean. Yes, I think I grew up I was kind of one of I would say the last generation, at least, in the Yountville area, before really the popularity of Napa and just the tourism and how, the cities and towns really kind of cater towards, folks coming in to enjoy this beautiful valley. And growing up in Yountville in the 80s and 90s, it's a small town. It's, less than 2 miles long and less than a mile wide, and there were plenty of kids in neighborhoods and families, and so being able to really rip around the town freely. We didn't lock our doors at night. We left the keys in our cars. We stayed out all night. There were no threats, and so it was an ideal for me place to grow up because I could be a kid, and there was plenty of kids to be a kid with. Whereas, now I've got 2 11-year-old daughters. And there's less of the younger generation, and so now you've got to drive to go have play dates, and there aren't kids up and down the streets. And so in that aspect, there has been a pretty big change within kind of the community and the culture of the valley. But again, it's for a reason, and my profession is making wine, and making wine is great, but if you can't sell it, it doesn't really matter. And so by catering towards the people coming in looking for the food and the wine and all those experiences, I think it's been a great thing for the industry. The original property here at Sullivan Rutherford Estate is 26 acres, 22 of which are planted. And again, we're really right in the middle of the valley. In fact, the property line to our north, so going up towards St. Helena, is what's known as the Rancho Camus line, and that really delineates historically the valley into 2 parcels. You have Rancho Camus to the south and Rancho Carne Humana to the north, and that was done in the early 1800s when Mexico owned this portion of California and decided to split the valley into 2 parcels. And it's kind of funny, the story goes, or lore goes, is the government put a person on a horse down in Napa, or southern part of the valley, and then a person on a horse in the northern part of the valley. And wherever they met is where they delineated the 2 ranchos. And that happens to be, the bordering line to our northern part of the property here. So in reality, we are in the center of the Napa Valley, and we are on the valley floor. In the last 5 years, we've brought in 2 more sites within the estate. We have a property, it's off Soda Canyon Road, so it's southern part of the valley to the east. I call it the foothills of Atlas Peak. It's not quite in the Atlas Peak AVA. It really borders Coombsville and Atlas Peak. It's kind of in no man's land, but really an up-and-coming spot as far as, kind of to your point, the relatively unknown until the last, 5 to 10 years. And now that area is kind of a hot spot for people, going, acquiring land, buying grapes, making wine. And what's unique about that area is that we're not quite in the hills, but again, the foothills, so kind of rolling, a little bit of elevation, but very volcanic soils down there, a lot of the white ash, rhyolitic type material. And then because we are a little bit farther south, we still get a coastal influence. So at night, the breeze picks up, it cools down, so you get the warm days and the cool nights, which for grape ripening is ideal, and for the health of the vine is ideal because they get a chance to reprieve at night and kind of recoup from the hot days. And so we're able to maintain acidity, but still get to the ripeness levels that we want. And for us, and I'm sure we'll get into it here in a little bit, but Merlot is a big grape variety for us and what we produce here at Sullivan Rutherford Estate. And going down to the kind of the base of Atlas Peak is prime Merlot territory, and really the vineyard that we developed out there was specifically for Merlot. And then we also purchased a property up in St. Helena, just below, so really the northern part of St. Helena below the St. Helena Hospital off Crystal Springs Road. There's a little valley that winds through there, and there was a 8.5 acre planted established Cabernet Sauvignon vineyard owned by Joe Criscione, and he planted that back in 2001. Tony Soder helped him establish that vineyard, and Mike Wolf, who happens to be our vineyard manager, has managed that vineyard for 20 plus years. And so really it was an opportunity that came about kind of going to this. If you can find a vineyard up in the hills or established and has a reputation, those are hard to come by. And if you have an opportunity, you got to jump on it. So we did. And what's cool about that is where we have kind of the white rhyolitic volcanic ash down off our Soda Canyon property. Up north in that area, it's also volcanic, but it's the red soils, iron rich, lots of obsidian, and obviously being north in the valley, it's a little bit warmer up there, so really conducive to Cabernet. But in a way, I think that's different than Rutherford. That site where you get the ripeness, you still get freshness because of the red soils and the iron. You still kind of get this sense of leanness. It's not as broad and over the top that you might get in the warmer climates. It still retains some of that freshness, that focus, and so it's just a very unique site. Cabernet is still what we have predominantly planted across all three properties, but for us, Merlot, there's a historical kind of aspect to Merlot here at Sullivan. Jim Sullivan, when he purchased the property in the late 70s and planted really in 1978, at that time, Napa, I think, was still kind of figuring out what grows best and where. The Cabernet craze hadn't really taken off at that point. So he had Zinfandel, Merlot, Cabernet, Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay planted all across the property. And what he found was that obviously the Bordeaux varieties did well, but Merlot specifically was outstanding here. And he kind of leaned into that and really kind of took, so he was still making Cabernet, but really focused on the Merlot. And really Jim Sullivan, his style, it's funny, the original phone number here is 1-800-BIG-REDS. And so he liked big extracted wines, and he approached that with his Merlot and made some very age-worthy wines. And I believe it was the 92 Wine Spectator put his Merlot in the top 100, and that was the first time that a Napa Valley Merlot had cracked that list. So really kind of put Jim and Sullivan on the map as far as a Merlot producer. And then you have the 80s and 90s come and go, and Cabernet just went crazy, as it should, because it grows phenomenally here and makes some of the best wines in the world. But unfortunately for other grape varieties, it's a problem, because all what we consider the best soils, so the soils that are the most well drained, that are more conducive to producing really high quality fruit, obviously got replanted, if they weren't already, to Cabernet Sauvignon. And within a property, of the 22 acres we have planted here, not 100% of it is ideal, right? And so, especially being on the valley floor, depending on where you are, there can be a heavy influence of clay, which isn't great from a quality perspective, because it retains water. It's a little bit cooler. It causes a lot of vigor, so the vines are very happy. They produce a lot of fruit, and just you in general make more or less concentrated wines. And so kind of by default, after all the Cabernet takes up your best soils, what do you do with kind of the inferior soils? And so you plant Merlot, or you plant Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay or whatever it may be, so that acreage is producing, but you as a winemaker and owner or a proprietor in this business understand that those blocks aren't necessarily your best blocks. And so given that, Merlot has kind of taken a back seat over the last 30 years to Cabernet Sauvignon, and winemakers understanding that, I mean, I can be the best winemaker in the world, but if I have low quality fruit, no matter what I do, I can't make an exceptional wine. I can make a good wine, an okay wine, I can't make an exceptional wine. So winemakers understood that, and they realized, okay, we've got these really extracted, structured Cabernet Sauvignons. How do we tone that down a little bit? Because again, I think the American consumer wants something that's a little bit more approachable. You know, we're impatient people. We don't want to wait 20 years for a wine to kind of resolve and get into that zone that is acceptable. And so how do you manage that? Well, you take some Merlot that you didn't give a lot of attention to, that you didn't push too hard in the fermenters, that you made in kind of a simple style that's approachable, and you add a little bit of that into the Cabernet to tone it down, to round it out, and there you have it. And that has kind of been the story of Merlot for the last 30 years, and it hasn't been taken seriously. And I think Jim Sullivan recognized that he was onto something. The Sullivans sold the property in 2018 to a small family out of Mexico City, led by Juan Pablo Torres Padilla. He's the managing general partner that's on site and really leading the direction of Sullivan today. And he spent half his life in France, in Paris, and went to school and spent a lot of time in Bordeaux and Burgundy, and really, had an opportunity to experience some of the best wines in the world. And as it turns out, Merlot, especially in Bordeaux, is driving that. Like literally the most expensive wines in the world are Merlot driven, if not, 100% Merlot. And so he had always had this affinity to Merlot and the potential that it had. And so when he and his family came out to the Napa Valley looking for a property and a winery to acquire, and they came across the Sullivans and learning about the history with Jim and Merlot and how well it did here, he saw an opportunity because nobody was, and I would say for the most part, nobody really is thinking of Merlot in the same class that you would think of Napa Valley Cabernet. So you can reach us at sullivanwine.com. You can purchase wines off there, set up your reservation, and just gather any information you'd like.